We've all been there, walking into a room full of strangers and feeling that sudden, heavy knot in our stomach. We want to be the person who commands the room, the one who is naturally charismatic, memorable, and liked by everyone they meet. But for most of us, small talk feels like a minefield. In her classic book, How to Talk to Anyone, Leil Lowndes reveals that the gift of gab isn't something you're born with. It's a collection of subtle, psychological techniques that anyone can master. Today, we're breaking down the 10 most powerful lessons from this communication masterpiece. These aren't just tips, they are social superpowers that will change the way the world sees you. Let's dive in. The flooding smile. In the high-stakes world of first impressions, we are often told that a smile is our greatest social asset. We are instructed to walk into a room with a grin plastered on our faces, ready to greet the world. However, Leil Lowndes argues that the instant smile is actually a tactical error. When you greet someone with a smile that appears the very millisecond your eyes meet, that smile loses its value. It becomes a reflex, a piece of social machinery that you offer to everyone indiscriminately, like a generic "have a nice day" printed on a grocery store receipt. To the recipient, an immediate smile feels robotic, cheap, and ultimately insincere. They subconsciously realize that you didn't smile because of them. You smiled because you were already smiling before you even knew who they were. To truly master the art of the first impression, you must adopt a technique known as the flooding smile. This approach requires a conscious, split-second delay that transforms a standard greeting into a powerful moment of personal connection. The process begins the moment you fix your eyes on the person you are meeting. Instead of letting your lips curve upward instantly, you must stay still for just 1 second. Look into their eyes and truly take in their persona. This tiny pause acts as a psychological buffer that signals to the other person that you are reacting specifically to what you see in them. After that brief, deliberate pause, you then let a slow, warm, and genuine smile flood over your face. It should start at your mouth and travel upward until it reaches your eyes, causing them to crinkle and light up. This flooding effect creates the sensation that your joy is a direct result of their presence. It suggests that you looked at them, evaluated who they were, and found something so genuinely pleasing that you couldn't help but break into a smile. By slowing down the physical reaction, you give the smile weight and authenticity. Think of the difference between a cheap flashlight and a high-end dimmer switch. The flashlight is either on or off. It's harsh and predictable. The dimmer switch, however, allows the light to grow in intensity, creating an atmosphere that is far more inviting and warm. The flooding smile is that dimmer switch. It convinces the recipient that they have had a unique impact on you. In a world where everyone is rushing and offering superficial pleasantries, this technique makes you stand out as someone who is observant, sincere, and deeply engaged. It builds an immediate bridge of trust, making the other person feel significant and special from the very first second of your interaction. Sticky eyes. In any social interaction, your eyes are the most powerful transmitters of your internal state. They can signal boredom, distraction, or, most importantly, profound interest. While most people understand that eye contact is necessary, they often treat it as a mechanical requirement, looking away the moment they finish a sentence or when a third party enters the conversation. Leil Lowndes suggests that to truly captivate someone and project an aura of intelligence and confidence, you must master the technique of sticky eyes. This means maintaining your gaze even after the spoken word has ended, creating a sense of psychological connection that feels almost magnetic. To implement sticky eyes, you must resist the urge to glance away the second there is a lull in the conversation or when you are finished speaking. Instead, keep your eyes locked onto your partner's. Imagine your eyes are glued to theirs with a warm, sticky substance. Even when you must look away, do it slowly and with apparent reluctance, as if breaking the connection is a difficult task for you. This sends a silent but powerful message to the other person. I am so absorbed in you and what you are saying that the rest of the room has effectively disappeared. This level of focused attention is rare in our modern, distracted world, and it acts as a form of social intimacy that makes people feel deeply validated. The psychology behind this technique is rooted in how we perceive status and confidence. People who are nervous or unsure of themselves tend to have shifty eyes. They are constantly scanning the room for exits or checking to see if others are watching. By contrast, a person who can hold a steady, unwavering gaze projects a sense of inner strength and old-world charisma. However, there is a nuance to this. You don't want to stare aggressively like a predator. The gaze should be sticky, meaning it is soft, interested, and slightly prolonged. When someone else joins the group, don't immediately snap your head toward them. Maintain your eye contact with the original speaker for an extra second before slowly transitioning your attention. This confirms to the speaker that they were your priority and that you weren't just waiting for someone better to come along. By using sticky eyes, you transform a mundane chat into a memorable encounter. You become the person who really listens, not just with your ears, but with your entire presence. This technique is particularly effective in professional environments or romantic settings where building trust and showing intensity can set you apart from the crowd. It creates a lingering impression of depth and sincerity, ensuring that long after the conversation has ended, the other person remembers how it felt to be the sole focus of your world. The what do you do trap. In the landscape of social introductions, there is a question so common it has become almost reflexive. What do you do? We ask it at parties, networking events, and weddings as a way to break the ice. However, Leil Lowndes identifies this as one of the most dangerous conversational pitfalls you can stumble into. When you lead with this question, you are essentially asking the other person to define their entire identity by their paycheck. To many, it feels like a social audit, as if you are weighing their worth, checking their bank account, or trying to decide how much respect they deserve based on their job title. If the person is currently between jobs, unhappy with their career, or simply someone who values their personal life over their professional one, this question creates an immediate wall of discomfort. To avoid this trap, you must learn the art of the delayed inquiry. A master communicator knows that the most interesting things about a person usually have nothing to do with their office cubicle. Instead of demanding a job title, you should allow the conversation to breathe. Talk about the environment you are in, the food, the music, or a mutual friend. By waiting for the other person to naturally bring up their work, or by avoiding the topic entirely for the first 10 minutes, you signal that you are interested in them as a human being, not just as a professional entity. This builds a foundation of rapport that isn't dependent on status or hierarchy. When you do eventually want to learn about their life's work, you should reframe the question to be more inclusive and less clinical. Instead of the blunt, "What do you do?" try asking, "How do you spend most of your time?" This phrasing is a stroke of social genius because it is entirely non-judgmental. It gives the person the freedom to answer however they choose. If they are passionate about their career, they will tell you about their job. If they are a dedicated parent, they might talk about their children. If they are a traveler, they might tell you about their latest expedition. This approach ensures that you never accidentally embarrass someone who is struggling with their career, and it allows the other person to present the version of themselves they are most proud of. By bypassing the "what do you do" trap, you distinguish yourself as a person of depth. You show that you don't need to categorize people into boxes of useful or not useful based on their industry. This creates a relaxed atmosphere where the other person feels safe to open up. In an era where everyone is trying to climb the ladder, your willingness to see past the resume makes you infinitely more likable and trustworthy. You aren't just another person looking for a networking connection. You are a genuine individual looking for a genuine conversation. Be a word detective. Every person you speak with is constantly dropping tiny breadcrumb-like clues about their lives, their passions, and what they actually want to discuss. Most people, unfortunately, are conversationally deaf. They are so busy thinking about what they are going to say next that they let these clues sail right past them. Leil Lowndes suggests that to be a master communicator, you must become a word detective. This means listening with a heightened sense of awareness, hunting for the one or two specific words in a sentence that carry extra emotional weight or provide a window into the speaker's world. When you find these words, you don't just acknowledge them, you seize them and use them to power the next phase of the conversation. Imagine you ask someone how their weekend was, and they respond, "It was okay, though the drive back from the lake was a bit of a nightmare." The average person focuses on the okay and says, "That's good," effectively killing the dialogue. The word detective, however, hears two major clues, the lake and nightmare. You now have two distinct paths to follow. You could ask, "Do you have a place at the lake, or were you just visiting?" Or a nightmare, "Was the traffic that bad, or did something happen?" By picking up on these specific detective clues, you show the speaker that you are not just hearing their noise, you are listening to their story. This makes the other person feel incredibly important and understood. Being a word detective also saves you from the awkwardness of interrogation-style questioning. Instead of peppering someone with random, unrelated questions like an officer at a border crossing, your questions flow naturally from the things they have already mentioned. It creates a seamless, velvet transition from one topic to the next. The speaker feels a sense of ease because the conversation feels like a collaborative dance rather than a forced interview. They will often remark later that you are a great talker, even if you spent 80% of the time listening, simply because you were skilled enough to keep the spotlight on the topics they subconsciously introduced. Furthermore, this technique allows you to uncover hidden interests that people might be too shy to bring up directly. Someone might mention in passing that they were busy with a project, or they finally finished that book. A word detective pounces on those specific nouns. What kind of project, or which book was it? These small, targeted inquiries open the floodgates. When you listen for the detective clues, you stop being a passive participant in a conversation and start becoming a conductor. You guide the energy of the room by simply paying attention to the details everyone else is ignoring. The Swiveling Spotlight. One of the most profound psychological truths in human interaction is that every person you meet carries an invisible, internal spotlight. This spotlight represents their attention, their ego, and their desire to be seen. In a typical conversation, most people are constantly trying to seize that spotlight and turn it toward themselves. They want to talk about their achievements, their problems, and their opinions. However, Leil Lowndes teaches that the true master of charisma does exactly the opposite. To be someone people are drawn to, you must imagine yourself as the technician behind the scenes, skillfully swiveling that spotlight onto the other person and keeping it there for as long as possible. When you keep the spotlight on your conversation partner, you are fulfilling one of the deepest human needs, the need for significance. Most people spend their lives feeling somewhat ignored or overlooked. When they meet someone who seems genuinely fascinated by their story, it creates an almost intoxicating level of rapport. The key to the swiveling spotlight is to resist the Me Too reflex. When someone tells you they just got back from a trip to Italy, the amateur communicator snaps the spotlight back to themselves by saying, "Oh, I was in Rome last summer." This effectively kills the other person's moment. The charismatic communicator, however, keeps the light steady on the speaker by asking, "Italy, that sounds incredible. What was the most unexpected thing you discovered there?" By keeping the spotlight on the other person, you actually become more interesting in their eyes. It is a social paradox. The less you talk about yourself, the more fascinating people think you are. This is because people associate the positive feelings they have while talking about their own passions with the person who is facilitating that experience. You aren't just a passive observer, you are an active director of their self-expression. You use your questions and your detective work to ensure the spotlight never flickers or moves away prematurely. You make them the star of the show. Furthermore, the swiveling spotlight allows you to gather immense amounts of information. While the other person is basking in the glow of your attention, you are learning about their values, their likes, and their dislikes. This gives you the upper hand in building a long-term relationship because you understand them far better than they understand you. When the time eventually comes for the spotlight to shine on you, which it naturally will in a balanced relationship, you will have built so much social credit that the other person will be eager to listen. Mastering this technique turns you into a conversational magnet, creating an environment where people feel energized, valued, and remarkably comfortable in your presence. Parrotting. Communication often hits a sudden, awkward wall when your conversation partner says something that leaves you completely stumped. Perhaps they are discussing a technical hobby you know nothing about, or maybe they've just shared a personal anecdote that feels like a conversational dead end. In these moments, most people panic, offer a generic, "That's nice," or awkwardly change the subject, which kills the rapport you've worked so hard to build. Leil Lowndes introduces a deceptively simple solution to this problem called parrotting. Like the bird that repeats what it hears, this technique involves simply repeating the last few words your partner said, but with a slight upward inflection in your voice, turning it into a question. The beauty of parroting lies in its ability to keep the other person talking without you having to contribute any new information or original thoughts. It is the ultimate social safety net. When you repeat their last words back to them as a question, you are essentially signaling, "That's fascinating. Please tell me more about that specific point." This prompts the speaker to expand, clarify, or tell a related story, effectively handing the baton back to them. For example, if someone says, "I spent the whole morning dealing with the most stubborn client," and you know nothing about their business, you simply parrot, "Stubborn client?" This encourages them to vent or explain the situation, keeping the conversation fluid and making you look like an incredibly engaged listener. This technique works because it mimics the natural way we process information when we are genuinely interested. It feels supportive rather than repetitive, because the other person is so focused on their own story that they don't realize you are using a trick. They only notice that you seem to be hanging on their every word. Parroting is particularly useful when you are exhausted, out of your element, or dealing with a person who is difficult to read. It allows you to maintain the swiveling spotlight on them while giving your own brain a much-needed rest. You aren't being lazy, you are being a facilitator. By mastering parroting, you eliminate the fear of running out of things to say. You realize that as long as the other person is speaking, you have an endless supply of conversational material. It turns you into a listening machine that validates the speaker's feelings and thoughts. In a YouTube summary or an audiobook context, this lesson is a game changer because it teaches the audience that great conversation isn't about being a brilliant orator. It's about being a mirror that reflects the other person's importance back to them. Never naked praise. In our social interactions, we often throw out compliments like confetti, hoping they will make people like us. We say things like "nice job," "great presentation," or "you look good." However, Leil Lowndes points out that these are examples of naked praise, compliments that are stripped of context, detail, and genuine weight. To the recipient, naked praise can often feel like a hollow social obligation, or worse, a patronizing pat on the head. Because it is so generic, it lacks the power to truly touch someone's heart or build a lasting bond. To elevate your communication, you must learn to clothe your compliments in specific details and emotional honesty, ensuring they are never delivered naked. The secret to powerful praise is the why. When you tell someone they did a great job, you must immediately follow it up with a specific observation that proves you were actually paying attention. Instead of saying "great speech," you might say, "great speech. I especially loved the way you used that metaphor about the mountain. It made the complex data so much easier to visualize." By adding that extra layer of detail, you transform a generic pleasantry into a clothed compliment. This shows the recipient that you didn't just hear them, you understood them and valued the specific effort they put into their work. Specificity is the hallmark of sincerity. Furthermore, never naked praise involves sharing how the other person's actions impacted you personally. People are far more moved by hearing how they affected someone else than by a clinical assessment of their performance. If a colleague helps you with a project, don't just say, "Thanks for the help." Try saying, "Thank you so much for stepping in. Your expertise on that spreadsheet saved me 3 hours of frustration and really lowered my stress levels." This type of feedback creates a deep, emotional connection because it validates the person's utility and kindness. It makes the praise feel earned and authentic rather than just a polite formality. In a professional or social summary, this lesson is vital because it changes the power dynamic of a conversation. Naked praise can sometimes feel like it's coming from a superior to an inferior. However, specific, clothed praise feels like it's coming from an equal who genuinely appreciates excellence. By mastering this technique, you ensure that your words of encouragement carry weight and stay with the person long after the conversation is over. You become the person whose opinion matters because you've demonstrated that you have the discernment to notice the small things that everyone else misses. Use matching, not mimicking. Humans are biologically wired to feel comfortable around people who remind them of themselves. This is a psychological phenomenon known as limbic synchrony. When we are with someone whose energy level, speech pattern, and physical presence mirror our own, we subconsciously feel safe, understood, and relaxed. Leil Lowndes takes this biological reality and turns it into a sophisticated social tool called matching. However, she adds a critical caveat. You must never mimic. Mimicry is a mocking, identical imitation that feels insulting and bizarre. Matching, on the other hand, is the subtle art of adopting the general vibe and tempo of your conversation partner to create an invisible bridge of rapport. To master matching, you must first become a keen observer of the other person's baseline. Before you even speak, pay attention to their physical energy. Are they leaning back in their chair with a relaxed, slow posture, or are they leaning forward, gesturing wildly with high-energy excitement? If they are calm and soft-spoken, and you burst into the conversation with the loud, rapid-fire energy of a circus barker, you will create immediate psychological friction. The other person will instinctively recoil, feeling that you are too much. Conversely, if you are too low energy for a high-spirited person, they may find you boring or uninspired. To match, you simply adjust your own internal thermostat to get within the same range as theirs. This technique extends deeply into the realm of language and voice. Listen to the words they use and the speed at which they deliver them. If your partner uses technical jargon or formal language, don't respond with overly casual slang. If they speak with a slow, thoughtful cadence, give them the respect of slowing down your own responses. This isn't about losing your identity or being a chameleon without a soul. It is about meeting someone where they are. It is the social equivalent of a musician tuning their instrument to match the rest of the orchestra. When you are in tune with someone, the conversation feels effortless, as if you have known each other for years. The most powerful aspect of matching is its effect on the subconscious. Most people will not be able to point to exactly why they like you. They will simply say they felt a good connection. In reality, that connection was built because you had the emotional intelligence to put your own ego aside and prioritize their comfort level. By matching their mood and pace, you eliminate the stranger danger that often haunts new interactions. You become a reflection of their own best self, which is the fastest way to build trust and influence in any environment, whether it's a first date or a high-level business negotiation. The latest news technique: nothing kills a conversation faster than a dead air silence where neither party can think of a single thing to say. We've all been there, shifting our weight, looking at our shoes, or taking a sudden, intense interest in the pattern on our drink napkin. Leil Lowndes suggests that the secret to never falling into this social abyss is a simple habit called the latest news technique. The premise is straightforward. Before you leave your house for any social gathering, whether it's a casual dinner or a formal networking event, you must spend at least 15 minutes catching up on the top headlines of the day. This isn't about becoming a political pundit or an expert on global economics. It's about arming yourself with conversational ammunition. When you enter a room with the latest news in your back pocket, you carry an aura of quiet confidence. You no longer have to fear the lull in conversation because you have a mental list of interesting things happening in the world. If the topic of the local sports team or the weather is exhausted, you can seamlessly pivot by saying, "I was just reading this morning about that new space telescope discovery." Or, "Did any of you see the news about the city's plan for the new downtown park?" These are safe topics that invite others to share their opinions and insights. It makes you appear well-rounded, informed, and, most importantly, interested in the world beyond your own immediate bubble. Furthermore, this technique serves as a social bridge. In a diverse room, you may find yourself talking to people from vastly different backgrounds or industries. The latest news acts as a common language. While you may not understand the intricacies of someone's job as a structural engineer, you both likely heard about the latest breakthrough in green energy or a viral story about a local hero. By bringing up current events, you provide a neutral ground where everyone can participate, regardless of their status or expertise. It prevents the conversation from becoming too niche and keeps the energy inclusive and lively. In the context of an audiobook summary, this lesson teaches that being a great talker is actually 90% preparation. The most charismatic people aren't necessarily the smartest or the funniest. They are simply the ones who came prepared to be relevant. By using the latest news technique, you ensure that you are never the person standing in the corner with nothing to contribute. You become a connector who helps keep the social gears turning, making you a valuable guest at any table and a person people genuinely enjoy having around because you always bring something fresh to the table. The broken record. In the world of social interaction, you will inevitably encounter people who are overly inquisitive, pushy, or determined to drag you into a conversation you simply do not want to have. Whether it is an intrusive question about your personal life, a prying inquiry into your finances, or someone trying to goad you into a heated political debate, these conversational bullies can make you feel cornered. Most people react by getting defensive, becoming flustered, or providing an elaborate excuse that only gives the other person more detective clues to attack. Leil Lowndes offers a sophisticated shield for these moments called the broken record. This technique allows you to hold your ground with grace and firm boundaries without ever losing your cool or appearing rude. The strategy is simple. When someone asks a question you don't want to answer, you provide a short, polite, and neutral response. If they push again, which prying people often do, you repeat your original response using the exact same words and, most importantly, the exact same calm tone of voice. You do not elaborate. You do not explain why you aren't answering. You simply play the same track over again. For example, if someone asks an inappropriate question about your salary, you might say, "I make enough to keep me happy and busy." If they push further with, "But come on, give me a ballpark figure," you simply repeat, "As I said, I make enough to keep me happy and busy." The psychological power of the broken record lies in its lack of new information. When you provide an excuse, such as "I'd rather not say because it's private," the other person sees that as a challenge to overcome. They might argue, "Oh, we're all friends here, it's not that private." But when you repeat the exact same phrase, you offer them nothing to grab onto. It signals that the topic is not up for negotiation and that your record is stuck on this specific answer. Because you maintain a pleasant and calm demeanor, you aren't being aggressive. You are simply being immovable. Using this technique protects your social dignity. It prevents you from being manipulated into saying things you'll later regret and keeps you in the driver's seat of the interaction. In a world where people often feel entitled to your information, the broken record is the ultimate tool for maintaining your boundaries while keeping the social atmosphere professional and polite. It teaches your audience that you don't owe anyone an explanation for your boundaries, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is exactly what you've already said. Mastering these 10 lessons is the difference between being a face in the crowd and being the person everyone wants to know. But remember, knowledge without action is just noise. Your challenge for this week is to pick just one of these techniques, maybe the flooding smile or parroting, and use it in your next conversation. If you found these insights helpful, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button so the algorithm knows this content is valuable. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell because we're summarizing a new life-changing book every 2 days to help you level up your mindset and your social game. Drop a comment below. Which of these 10 tips are you going to try first? I read every single comment, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next summary.